There is a berry that produces more antioxidants than blueberries, grows in every climate zone where humans live, and once planted, feeds your family for decades without replanting. It survives droughts that kill tomatoes, thrives in soils too poor for corn, and produces fruit from midsummer until the first frost. Traditional healers used it to treat everything from inflammation to immune disorders, and modern science confirms what they knew. This single plant contains compounds that pharmaceutical companies spend billions trying to synthesize. The agricultural industry has spent the last century making sure most people never learn to grow it at home. In 1950, the average American backyard produced 40% of the family's vegetables. Today, that number has dropped to less than 3%. We became dependent on grocery stores, supply chains, and corporations that profit from scarcity. But what if I told you the most nutritious foods on Earth are not exotic imports from distant continents? What if the real superfoods are perennial plants that grow themselves year after year, requiring almost no maintenance, no fertilizer, and no annual replanting? What if the solution to rising food costs, declining nutrition, and corporate control over our food supply is already waiting in your backyard? This is the story of the perennial superfood revolution, the plants that agriculture doesn't want you to grow, and why learning to cultivate them might be the most important skill you develop this decade. I'm going to reveal 3 specific plants that outperform every superfood in the grocery store, cost nothing to maintain once established, and face restrictions or challenges that keep them out of most home gardens. But first, let me show you proof this system works. Last spring, I planted 12 goji berry bushes in raised beds behind my house. The initial investment was $60. By autumn, those same bushes produced over 40 pounds of fresh berries. Goji berries retail for $25 per pound at health food stores. That single harvest was worth $1,000. This year, with no additional input, no replanting, no seed purchases, those same bushes will produce even more. This is not about gardening as a hobby. This is about food independence, about reclaiming control over what feeds your family, and about understanding why certain plants that could revolutionize home food production face systematic barriers to cultivation. The first superfood they don't want you growing is the goji berry. Lycium barbarum has been cultivated in Asia for over 3,000 years. Traditional Chinese medicine called it the fruit of longevity. Modern analysis reveals why. Goji berries contain more beta-carotene than carrots, more iron than spinach, and all 8 essential amino acids in concentrations rarely found in plant foods. They boost immune function, support eye health, and contain compounds that may slow cellular aging. But here is what makes goji berries dangerous to the agricultural system. They are completely self-sufficient. One bush lives for decades, producing fruit year after year without replanting. They require no fertilizer, no pesticides, and minimal water once established. They thrive in poor soils where conventional crops fail. They are hardy from Zone 3 to Zone 10, meaning they grow in virtually every climate where humans live. You cannot patent a goji berry. You cannot create a hybrid variety that farmers must buy new each season. You cannot control a plant that spreads by seed and sucker, reproducing freely without corporate oversight. Every goji bush in your garden represents decades of food production that generates zero profit for seed companies, chemical manufacturers, or industrial agriculture. The nursery industry sells goji plants, but they market them as ornamental curiosities, not as serious food crops. Agricultural extension offices rarely mention them in home gardening guides. Grocery stores import dried goji berries from China at premium prices, while the same berries could grow fresh in American backyards for free. The second plant faces different restrictions. Blue elderberry, Sambucus caerulea, produces clusters of dark purple berries packed with vitamins A, B, and C. European studies show elderberry extract reduces cold and flu symptoms by up to 70%. The berries contain anthocyanins, powerful antioxidants that protect cellular DNA from damage. Indigenous peoples across North America used elderberry for medicine, food, and even musical instruments from the hollow stems. But if you live in California's Central Valley, growing elderberry becomes legally complicated. The Valley elderberry longhorn beetle, listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, lives exclusively on elderberry plants. Federal regulations restrict pruning, harvesting, and removal of elderberry stems larger than 1 inch in diameter across the beetle's entire range. This creates an impossible situation for home growers. Elderberry bushes naturally produce stems larger than 1 inch. Proper pruning maintains plant health and increases berry production. But in beetle habitat zones, cutting those stems violates federal law. The regulations don't prohibit planting elderberry or harvesting berries, but they make long-term cultivation nearly impossible. The irony runs deeper. Elderberry syrup sells for $30 per bottle in health food stores. The same amount of syrup can be made from berries harvested from a single mature bush. But regulations designed to protect an endangered beetle effectively prevent thousands of families from growing their own medicine. The third superfood presents the strangest case of all. Jerusalem artichoke, also called sunchoke, produces tubers containing more iron than potatoes, more potassium than bananas, and high levels of inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria. The tubers have a low glycemic index, making them ideal for diabetics. They store well through winter without refrigeration and can be eaten raw or cooked. Jerusalem artichokes are not actually from Jerusalem, and they are not artichokes. The name comes from the Italian girasole, meaning sunflower, corrupted by English pronunciation. They are native to eastern North America, where indigenous peoples cultivated them alongside corn and beans. But Jerusalem artichokes have been classified as invasive weeds in multiple states, not because they damage ecosystems, but because they grow too well. A single plant produces dozens of tubers. Each tuber fragment left in soil sprouts into a new plant. They spread through underground rhizomes, creating dense colonies that persist for decades. This success makes them unwanted in managed landscapes. Homeowner associations ban them. Agricultural extension offices publish eradication guides. The same vigor that makes Jerusalem artichokes nutritionally valuable makes them problematic for conventional gardening systems that demand control and predictability. The pattern becomes clear. The most nutritious, productive, and sustainable food plants face barriers not because they fail, but because they succeed too well. They grow without permission, reproduce without corporate control, and provide abundance without ongoing profit. They represent everything industrial agriculture fears. Food sovereignty, plant independence, and the radical idea that families can feed themselves without buying seeds, fertilizers, or pesticides every year. These plants teach a different relationship with food production. Instead of annual inputs and constant management, they offer perennial abundance. Instead of dependence on supply chains, they provide local resilience. Instead of corporate control, they enable true food security. But learning to grow them requires understanding why they face restrictions and how to navigate the challenges that keep them out of most home gardens. The barriers extend beyond individual plants to entire categories of perennial food systems. Take asparagus, one of the few perennials most people recognize as food. Commercial asparagus farms require 3 years before the first harvest and 7 years to reach full production. But once established, a single asparagus bed produces for 30 to 50 years without replanting. The long-term thinking required challenges everything our economy teaches about food production. Seed companies cannot sell asparagus seeds annually because you plant once per generation. Chemical companies cannot sell fertilizers because established asparagus thrives in poor soil. Equipment manufacturers cannot sell tillage tools because perennial beds never need plowing. The entire industrial food system depends on annual crops that require annual inputs. Even home gardening culture reflects this bias. Garden centers stock their shelves with tomato seedlings, pepper transplants, and annual flowers. The perennial food section occupies a tiny corner, usually limited to fruit trees and berry bushes. Gardening magazines feature articles about preparing soil for spring planting, not about establishing food forests that feed families for decades. The educational system reinforces these patterns. Agricultural universities teach crop rotation, soil preparation, and pest management for annual systems. Students learn to think in growing seasons, not in decades. Extension agents recommend vegetables that fit conventional garden calendars. The knowledge of perennial food production exists, but it remains marginalized in academic agriculture. Master gardeners pass certification tests focused on annual vegetables, lawn care, and ornamental landscaping. The curriculum rarely includes food forests, perennial polycultures, or indigenous food systems. Even permaculture, which emphasizes perennial food production, operates outside mainstream agricultural education. This knowledge gap has consequences. During the 2020 supply chain disruptions, seed companies sold out of tomato and lettuce seeds within weeks. But nurseries still had fruit trees, berry bushes, and perennial vegetables sitting unsold. People reached for familiar annual crops while ignoring perennials that could have provided food security for decades. We have been trained to think of food as something that comes from stores, not something that grows around us. We see dandelions as weeds, not as the most nutrient-dense greens available. We view volunteer fruit trees as nuisances rather than gifts. We spray herbicides on purslane while buying expensive omega-3 supplements. This mindset serves corporate interests perfectly. Consumers who cannot recognize food in its natural form remain dependent on processed products. People who fear wild plants buy sanitized supermarket produce. Families who cannot grow their own food become captive markets for industrial agriculture. The solution requires relearning skills our grandparents took for granted. Identifying edible plants, understanding seasonal cycles, and developing relationships with perennial food systems. This knowledge cannot be purchased. It must be practiced season after season until perennial abundance becomes natural. The plants themselves provide the education. Goji berries teach patience as they establish root systems over several seasons. Elderberries demonstrate the connection between wildlife habitat and human food security. Jerusalem artichokes show how abundance can become overwhelming without proper management. Each plant carries lessons about resilience, adaptation, and working with natural systems rather than against them. They reveal how food production can heal landscapes instead of depleting them. They demonstrate that the most nutritious foods often require the least human intervention. But accessing this knowledge means questioning fundamental assumptions about how food should be grown, who should grow it, and what constitutes a productive landscape. It means seeing gardens as ecosystems, not as outdoor factories. It means thinking in decades, not in quarterly profits. The agricultural industry understands these implications. Perennial food systems threaten the entire model of annual inputs, corporate seeds, and chemical dependencies. They represent a return to food sovereignty that existed before industrial agriculture captured our food supply. This is why certain plants face restrictions, why others are labeled as weeds, and why the most productive food systems remain invisible in mainstream gardening culture. The knowledge exists, the plants are available, and the techniques are proven. What remains is the willingness to plant for the future rather than for this season alone. The next section of this story reveals specific techniques for establishing perennial food systems despite institutional barriers. It explores how to navigate regulations, manage vigorous plants, and build food security that lasts for generations. The plants are waiting. The question is whether we are ready to learn what they have to teach. They have to teach. 3 plants. Goji berries that produce for decades without replanting. Elderberries restricted by federal regulations designed to protect endangered beetles. Jerusalem artichokes classified as invasive weeds because they succeed too well. Each one reveals the same pattern. The most nutritious, productive, and sustainable food plants face barriers not because they fail, but because they threaten systems built on scarcity and dependence. The agricultural industry profits from annual crops that require annual purchases. Seed companies, chemical manufacturers, and equipment dealers need you to buy their products every growing season. Perennial food systems that produce for decades without inputs represent everything they cannot control or monetize. But the knowledge survives. In backyard gardens where goji berries fruit until frost. In wild spaces where elderberries feed both wildlife and people who know their value. In forgotten corners where Jerusalem artichokes wait underground, ready to feed families who understand their worth. The choice is simple. Continue depending on supply chains that prioritize profit over nutrition, or start planting for a future where your backyard provides what grocery stores cannot. The most powerful act of resistance against corporate food control is learning to grow your own abundance. These plants have been waiting centuries for hands willing to tend them. They offer more than food. They offer freedom. The question is not whether you can grow them. The question is whether you will start before you need them. The revolution begins in your backyard, one perennial at a time.